All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is 1 p.m. and we are going to call today's meeting of the Planning Advisory Committee to order. First order of business is we need adoption of the agenda, so I would ask for a motion that the agenda for Wednesday, November 27th, 2024, Planning Advisory Committee meeting be adopted as circulated and with the following amendments. Addition of item 4.1, Deputation Ian Franklin, KLM Planning, Inc., and the deletion of item 3.2, Public Meeting Report Plan 2024-067, an application to amend the Town of Lindsay zoning bylaw 2000-74 at 370 Kent Street West, Lindsay, 1193017, Ontario, Inc. Mover, Mayor Elmsley, seconded by Member Willick. Any discussion? All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Is there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Member Willick?
On item 2.1, client is aware I can release that family is a client of our office.
3.1? Okay. You've got that, Joel? We're good? All right. If there's nothing further, then we will move directly into the public meeting reports. So item 3.1. So at this point, I would ask Member Willick if you would go for a little walk, and we'll call you back at the appropriate time. Item 3.1, Plan 2024-066, an application to amend the Township of Ops zoning bylaw 93-30 at 77 Kawartha Lakes Road 36, Lindsay. Julio, you with us?
Hello?
Yep, go ahead, Julio.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Julio Sarchi Caldeira, and I am an urban planner from Dilla Consulting Limited, here on behalf of the City of Kawartha Lakes Development Services Division. Thank you for the applicant for being here today, and to staff, the chair, and the rest of the Planning Advisory Committee for considering the zoning bylaw amendment application to fulfill a condition of the consent for the severance of a surplus from dwelling under consent file number D03-2024-010. The zoning bylaw amendment would prohibit future residential development on portions of the retained agricultural lands in accordance with the conditions of consent approval. I would like to note that notice for this application was originally given to each the landowner, agencies, and departments in accordance with matters of the Planning Act. This is the first circulation and appearance at PAG for this application. The subject lands, as shown on screen, are located at 77 County Road 36 and legally known as part half of East Lot 17, Concession 6, former Township of Ops in the City of Kawartha Lakes. The subject lands encompass a total area of approximately 13.6 hectares with approximately 239 meters of frontage on County Road 36. It is an existing undersized agricultural lot. Existing uses on these lands include a single-family dwelling and agricultural operation. Surrounding uses include residential to the north, agricultural to the north, east, and south, and a trail and a golf course to the west. The subject lands are zoned agricultural on Schedule A of the Township of Ops zoning bylaw and designated prime agricultural on Schedule A3 of the City of Kawartha Lakes official plan. As per Prime Agricultural Policy 15.3.5 of the official plan, for surplus farm dwellings, the retained agricultural land is to be rezoned to prohibit any residential use. The retained land, which would be 12.99 hectares, is also deficient in lot area, where the zoning bylaw requires 37 hectares. The retained lands would be rezoned to ensure compliance. As per condition of the consent for severance of a surplus farm dwelling, the applicant seeks to rezone portions of the subject lands from the agricultural zone to a site-specific agricultural exception 23 zone to prohibit residential use and to address minimum lot area requirements. At this time, this fulfills the statutory public meeting requirement as set out in the Planning Act. As per Appendix D of the Planning Advisory Committee Report, Plan 2024-066, the proposed zoning bylaw amendment seeks to amend Schedule A of the Township of Ops zoning bylaw 93-30 from the agricultural zone to the site-specific agricultural exception 23 zone for the portion of the lands noted as A-23 on the screen. The textual amendment would prohibit residential uses on the retained land and permit a minimum lot area of 12.99 hectares on the land zone A-23. In terms of policy conformity, the zoning bylaw amendment is supported in the Provincial Planning Statement 2024 and in the City of Kawartha Lakes official plan. As part of the review, relevant departments and agencies were circulated on the application, and as noted in the report, any comments received has been addressed. Planning staff are therefore of the opinion that the zoning bylaw amendment is appropriate as it prohibits residential uses on the retained land, thus facilitating the lot severance. In addition, it addresses minimum lot area requirements. Accordingly, staff respectfully recommend that the zoning bylaw amendment respecting application D06-2024-019 in the form attached in Appendix D to report Plan 2024-066 be approved. Finally, staff and the applicant are here to assist in any questions anyone may have at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Julio. Questions from committee? Councillor Warren.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I was just going to move the recommendations.
There is a process.
Okay.
Committee, any further questions of Julio at this time? Everybody good? All right. Does the applicant, owner, or their agent wish to speak to the application?
Hi, my name's Gavin Tyler, Ontario Land Surveyor, bona fide farmer, and the owner applicant for this application. Again, I think Julio summed everything up. If you guys have any questions, I'm happy to address them. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Tyler? Everybody's good? Okay. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak to this application? Anyone from the public wishing to speak to the application? Calling a third and final time. Anyone from the public wishing to speak to the application? All right. Seeing none and hearing none. Councillor Warren?
Sorry for jumping the gun. I thought we'd already been through that. Okay, I move the recommendations that report Plan 2024-006 zoning bylaw amendment 77 County Road 36, part of E1/2, Lot 17, Concession 6, former Township of Ops, Gavin Tyler, be received, that a zoning bylaw amendment respecting application D06-2024-019, substantially in the form attached as Appendix D to report Plan 2024-00066 be approved and adopted by council, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the documents required by the approval of this application.
Seconder, Member O'Reilly. Any discussion? Calling the question. All in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Would somebody like to grab Member Willick? Thanks, Charlie. Or Councillor McDonald, sorry. Thank you, Councillor Deputy Mayor McDonald. All right. So at this point, the public meeting being held under the Planning Act is now adjourned. And we will move into item 4, deputations, 4.1, Ian Franklin.
accounts and the additional
Great.
background.
Apologies, folks. I am just Ian Franklin, a senior planner at KLM Planning Partners. I'm just here to answer any questions as they relate to our return of report for 203 to 213 Highway 36.
Okay, committee, any questions for Mr. Franklin at this
So
time?
background and traffic count. So what it's done is
Everybody's good? Okay, I think they're all good at this point, Mr. Franklin. Could I have a motion
just thank you.
to receive the deputation? Mayor Elmsley, seconder, Councillor Richardson. Any discussion? All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Item 5, correspondence. Joel, I believe there's none. Item 6, regular and returned reports. Item 6.1, as an application to amend the Town of Lindsay zoning bylaw 2000-75 at 203, 207, and 213 Kawartha Lakes Road 36. Lindsay. Matt Alexander. Matt with us? Do you want to go through anything here, Matt?
I can provide a summary of the staff report if you like, or just go straight to questions if there are any questions.
Committee, would you like a summary given from Mr. Alexander, or are you good to go right to questions? Summary would be good, Matt. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. So as mentioned, this is an application for zoning bylaw amendment for 203, 207, and 213 Highway 36. This was previously brought to committee for a public meeting, and since then we have been able to resolve a number of issues that had been identified or had, let's say, delayed or made a recommendation not possible at that time. The application is related to the 3 lots in the on the subject lands. The proposal is to rezone these from future residential to a residential multiple special exception zone with a holding provision to facilitate the development of 62 single detached units, a new public road, and a stormwater management block. The applicant has also submitted a draft plan of subdivision, and at the meeting on March 19th, 2024, Council adopted a resolution looking for staff to work with the applicant to address public and agency feedback. And here is the illustration of the plan of subdivision. So the site is located within the built boundary and is designated residential in the Lindsay secondary plan. The current zoning is future residential, and the applicant proposes to rezone that as residential multiple with some site-specific exceptions to accommodate the specific development that is proposed. Outstanding technical reviews at the time of the public meeting have been completed. Following the issuance of all the comments to the applicant has submitted a second submission to resolve the engineering, planning, and transportation-related comments. The key issue was related to available servicing capacity for the proposed development. So at this time, there is not adequate servicing to proceed with the application. However, there is nothing to suggest that the proposal should not go forward once servicing is available. And so for that reason, we're recommending the holding provision to be included so that once the servicing is available, then the development can proceed. It's intended that staff will continue to work with the applicant to prepare the draft plan of subdivision and to meet the conditions that will be brought forward for consideration at a later date. As far as consultation, all of required notices were provided. 2 members of the public spoke during the March statutory public meeting regarding the file. Residents expressed some opposition to the application with concerns over archaeological investigations and loss of farmland. These members of the public were notified that the file is returning for recommendations, for a recommendation. And with that, that is our recommendation for that item.
Thanks.
Sorry, I feel like I skipped over the recommendation. So the recommendation is that the report be received, that the zoning bylaw amendment respecting the application be approved and adopted by council, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the documents. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Mr. Alexander. Committee, any questions at this time? Seeing none, you've heard the report. What are your wishes? Mayor Elmsley?
Move it as printed, that report plan 2024-064 zoning bylaw amendment 203, 207, and 213 Highway 36, Town of Lindsay, Ashmere Lindsay Developments Limited, KLM, be received, that a zoning bylaw amendment restricting application D06 2024-001 substantially in the form attached as Appendix D to Report Plan 2024-064 be approved and adopted by council, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the documents required by the approval of this application.
Seconder, Member Barkwell. Any discussion? Calling the question, all in favor? And that carries. Thank you. That brings us to item 6.2, Plan 2024-065, an application to amend the Town of Lindsay zoning bylaw 2000-75 at 61 and 75 Logie Street, Lindsay. Mr. Alexander, you want to give us a summary?
Yes, I will, Chair. So this application is a zoning bylaw amendment which will facilitate the development of 16 semi-detached units and 1 single detached dwelling spread across 3 separate lots on the subject lands. The recommendation is for the report to be received and that the zoning bylaw amendment be approved and adopted by council, and for the mayor and clerk to be authorized to execute the documents. And so we're seeing a location map here. The zoning bylaw amendment application applies to these 3 individual parcels that are all in common ownership. The application is to rezone the properties from future residential to residential 1 with a special exception zone, and a residential residential 3 with a special exception zone to facilitate the development of the 16 semi-detached units and 1 single detached unit. At the council meeting of January 30th, 2024, council adopted a resolution directing that the report related to the public meeting be received for information, and that staff work with the applicant to resolve all technical issues and concerns. Following the initial submission of the application, which included an amendment to the Town of Lindsay official plan, the Town of Lindsay official plan was formally repealed through decisions of the as a result of decisions from the OLT, and so that need for an official plan amendment no longer existed, and it is subject to the policies of the Lindsay secondary plan. And so if you're looking back in the files, there had been an official plan amendment application with this, but that is no longer applicable or relevant. Also, following the initial submission of the application, the province of Ontario released the updated provincial planning statement, which came into effect October 20th. And so there was some additional review related to ensuring that the application was consistent with the new provincial planning statement. Since that meeting in January, the outstanding technical reviews of submissions have been completed. Following the issuance of all comments to the applicant submitted a second submission and resolved the engineering, planning, and transportation related comments respecting the zoning bylaw amendment application. And here is a close-up, more of a close-up on one of the individual lots and the development that is proposed there. So you can see that access to the individual units would be by a common driveway. So there would only be the one entrance onto the roadway. As a result of the ongoing municipal Class B environmental assessment being undertaken by the city for the Logie Street Sanitary Pumping Station and the Rideau Street Sanitary Pumping Station, engineering staff had expressed concerns about servicing capacity here. But through review and consultation with engineering and the applicant, it was determined that this should not, as in the previous application, this should not prevent the principle of development from being established here. The EA and design will inform the upgrade requirements and capacity increase needed to support this application. But from a planning perspective, it's our opinion there's no need to delay the zoning bylaw amendment on its own. Staff feel that implementation of a holding provision will provide assurance that the application does not precede confirmation of servicing. In addition, so in terms of consultations, all required notices were provided. The statutory public meeting was held on January 17th, 2024, and the application was circulated to all relevant city agencies and outside commenting authorities. 2 members of the public provided email comments regarding the application following the first public meeting. 1 resident expressed their opposition to the application, and the second expressed concerns over grading and stormwater runoff, infrastructure capacity, and traffic concerns. These members of the public were notified of the file returning for a recommendation. And of course, those comments were also considered in our review of the engineering comments and the review of the grading plan and other elements. And we feel comfortable recommending approval of the zoning bylaw amendment at this time. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for that, Mr. Alexander. Committee, any questions? Member Willick?
Through you, Chair, just curiosity, are the access roads to that block there, is that a municipal road where it says common access, or is it a private road?
I'm going to have to take a look here and zoom in. Are you referring, sorry, through you, Chair, are you referring to the gray shaded area in front of the proposed units?
Yes, it says common access in front of blocks, units 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and there's another block that has units 1 through 10.
Through you, Chair, my understanding is that that is private property. That is not proposed to be a public driveway.
Councillor Richardson?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So that is private property to the new development?
Correct.
Okay. Just a question. Numerous times it's come up through the report regarding the service capacity and the fact that the holding provision will be put in place. Are we able to just comment from a city perspective of those concerns when we talk about service capacity?
I'm sorry, is that, I thought that was to the engineering. Could you repeat the question, please?
In the report, you expressed the issue with service capacity in that we move forward with the holding provision. I'm just wondering, with the service capacity being an issue with the holding, is there any thoughts that there will be delays because of this?
Oh, through you, Chair. In terms of delays, if this was approved without a holding symbol at this time, they still would not be able to proceed with any development because they wouldn't be able to receive servicing. The city wouldn't be able to allocate any servicing capacity to this development. The holding symbol is intended to ensure that in the interim that it's understood that the servicing needs to be upgraded and made available to the property before they can file a building permit or divide the property. I don't think that, all things being equal, this represents an additional delay to the development. It is the development is dependent on the servicing, and having this holding symbol there doesn't add additional delay to it. The process of removing a holding symbol, it does require a decision of council, but generally this is achieved fairly quickly. It doesn't have the same level of scrutiny necessarily as a full-on zoning bylaw amendment, and we would be working with the applicant to ensure that all the timing makes sense, where the servicing becomes available and they're able to lift the holding symbol.
Any further questions from committee? All right, seeing none. What is your recommendation to council? Member O'Reilly?
The receives the report and as printed. I think you need to read.
Seconder, Councillor Warren. Any further discussion? Calling the question, all in favor? That carries. Thank you. That takes us to item 6.3, Plan 2024-070, a request to enter into subdivision agreement for Walden Farm Plan of Subdivision 16T-16501. Director Barry.
Sure, thank you, Chair. Just provide the committee with some good news to see this 8-lot fairly low density plan of subdivision coming forward. We're advancing this process. The proponent, in this case, that's Anthony Tenaglia, and a numbered company, are working towards completing their conditions of draft approval for the subdivision. In order to get us to this point, our colleagues in the Development Engineering Division have done a lot of heavy lifting to refine the conditions of draft approval. Added to that is the subdivision agreement that we feel now is in a form that is substantially complete. It is included in your packages in the Appendix 2 report, Plan 2024-070, and that is our way of indicating to you and ultimately to council that the subdivision agreement is just about ready to proceed, and will bring the proponent closer to being able to finalize their draft plan of subdivision and finalize it to registration and begin development. So I do want to just draw your attention to the fact that this land has undergone an official plan amendment as well as a zoning bylaw amendment to facilitate this residential subdivision. Additionally, there are a few final financial components of the subdivision agreement that are not unique, that are contained in every subdivision agreement regarding securities and other administrative fees yet to be finalized. So entirely expected that the numbers that you see in the report will alter somewhat before the final plan of subdivision is and the subdivision agreement is registered. Mr. Chair, I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Questions for Director Barry? Councillor Warren.
Through you, Mr. Chair. And looking through this, I was wondering, we're in the middle of bringing back a tree bylaw for development. I think it's coming in, it was supposed to be December, but I think it's going to be January. So will that impact this at all going forward?
Mr. Chair, through you to the member. Councillor, we will, prior to finalizing any of the components of this plan, take a look at the status of that proposed bylaw. If it is in effect, we'll make sure that the development proceeds in accordance with it, but it is premature at this time to comment on how, if at all, that bylaw would impact this development.
Through you, and so talking to Robin Carlson, there is, at this point, there is something within the bylaws that allow for a certain number of trees still, without the bylaw. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So there are some components of the subdivision agreement that account for compensation. Perhaps that's what you're referring to. So yes, and that's a standard clause. The bylaw would not impact how we can deal with tree compensation otherwise.
Member O'Reilly.
Yeah, just to speak to that, it's just about all clear down there on this property at the very end. And this started in the 80s with Rob Griffith, for those of us who were around county council. So it's a long time getting here, but thanks for getting this far. And the other thing, was everything satisfied with the cemetery too, Leah, as far as you know? Through Mr. Chair to Leah?
Through the chair, so the zoning bylaw in particular does take into account the lands to be continued for that use and to ultimately protect the area from any kind of encroachment or intrusion on that sacred space. There also are conditions within the subdivision agreement that rely on sign-off from the Bereavement Association or agency in this province.
Thank you.
Any further questions of Director Barry? All right, seeing none, what is your recommendation to council? Member O'Reilly?
Thank you. I'll move the report plan 2024-070 request to enter into subdivision agreement for the Walden Farm Planted Subdivision 16T16501 be received for information and subdivision agreement substantially in the form attached in Appendix C to report plan 2024-070 request to enter subdivision agreement for the Walden Farm Planted Subdivision 16T-16501 be endorsed by council and the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the documents required by the approval for this request.
Seconder, Councillor Richardson. Any further discussion? All in favor? That carries. Thank you. That brings us to item 6.4, engineering 2024-029, 2024 registered subdivision status update. Christina.
Sorry, my apologies. Good afternoon, through you, Mr. Chair. Today, we're pleased to bring the 2024 Registered Subdivision Agreement update to committee. This is our opportunity to communicate to you where we are with the current subdivisions that are within the implementation stage of the development process. We have noted the items that have changed since our update last year. In particular, we've had some additional lots built upon. We have at least one phase of Arizona Heights that's recorded here that will actually be coming in this meeting for future consideration for the assumption bylaw as well, but it is in here now until assumption actually occurs. We have also noted in here that we are anticipating at any time prior to the end of this year, beginning of next year, that there will be a registration of the Tribute Phase 1 lands. So that's the increase of another 270 lots available for building upon within the city. And I'm available for any questions that you may have at this time on any of these items.
Okay, questions for Christina, Councillor Warren.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that. So Sedona Phase 2, I guess I don't know the proper name on 49 there. What's the status of that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So Phase 2 Arizona Heights is still going through the review process and hasn't been actually granted a subdivision agreement at this time, or a detailed design that we're all in favor of. They're still at the pre-consultations or the pre-servicing stage.
Do you have any idea how long that process, where it stands, like how you see that will be rolled out?
For follow-up through you, Mr. Chair, it's our understanding that it is with the development team to work upon and to provide that information to us. Last that they had indicated to us is they were still working on some of their utility plans and landscape plans. Those do tend to be some of the latter items that are coming forward with a detailed design submission.
Any further questions? All right, seeing none, is there a motion to receive that update? Councillor Ashmore, second by Councillor Warren. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. 6.5 is engineering 2024-30, 2025 subdivision agreement template update. Christina.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to the 2025 subdivision agreement template update, you will note in the report that we had some items that needed to be updated with respect to accessibility and some terminology that may have been appropriate in previous years, but now had to be updated to be more inclusive language, but also more accessible. We also wanted to provide some additional guidance. As a result of going through various subdivision agreements with various parties over the last year, we recognized that there was some need to put in some additional cues and tips as to who is actually responsible for submitting what information into our template. We also had to remove some items that are no longer applicable. As council's aware, there was a rescinding of the development charge assistance policy, for instance, so we needed to remove some language with respect to that deferral of development charges. We've also removed the reference to the limit of 100 homes per subdivision within the Lindsay area. We wanted to provide some additional information with respect to the excess soils. So as legislation changes, we provide annual updates to our agreement templates and our guidelines in an effort to ensure that we're being constant and consistent, but also current with what is happening at this time. We had some additional wording provided through the city solicitor with respect to the tree management and streetscape plan item, and also some compliance with respect to archaeological requirements. Some additional changes that have happened are with respect to the ministry and just ensuring that we've got everything up to date with the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks with respect to our consolidated linear infrastructure environmental compliance approval as well. And in general, I believe those are most of our updates. If you have any questions for me, I'm available.
Questions, Mayor Elmsley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. Just a couple of things. We've removed the reference to a limit of 100 homes. Have we replaced it with any number, or is it wide open?
Thank you for the question through you, Mr. Chair. My understanding is that we are now looking at subdivisions from the perspective of the entirety that's being proposed. And what happens as you break it into phases, you don't have necessarily a guarantee of service capacity when you go from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3. And if you break out your phases into different numbering than you anticipated at the beginning or what you described through draft plan, then it's all going to be based on what is available at the time that they come forward with that. But if there's any other zoning provisions, et cetera, I would defer to Director Barry for that particular discussion, but that's my understanding at this time.
Thank you. One other thing, is there any provision on affordable housing within this agreement?
So thank you for the question through the chair. No, my understanding is that anything with respect to affordable housing is going to be handled through the draft plan conditions and possibly any other master development agreements that are contemplated. And at that time, those matters would then be inserted into this template agreement as they pertain to that specific development.
Thank you.
Councillor Richardson?
Thank you, and through your chair. Just when you're looking at the agreement template, one item did flag to me is the length of time for installation of all public services. How critical is that from your perspective that that's added into these agreements?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. The key to the timing of installing all the public services is that we want to ensure that the services are installed to the approved design within the same time frame that that approval pertains. So in other words, it's critical that we try to get as many subdivisions assumed in as timely a manner as possible to ensure that what's built and what's assumed is actually current to our standards. And what has happened over some time, as everyone is well aware, I'm sure, is that we have some developments or subdivisions that were contemplated 10, 20, 30 years ago, and now that they're being brought forward, it's very difficult to make the designs, standards, guidelines, et cetera, of a previous approval make sense in a 2024 era. or going into a 2025. So on that note, we do have updates to our 2020, we'll be providing updates for 2025 on our infrastructure guidelines. They will be coming, though, however, not in today's meeting at the end of this year as typical, but instead they'll be coming early in the new year as a result of some updates coming to council through the Transportation Master Plan, which would affect some of the road infrastructure guidelines, et cetera, and also through the master servicing studies that are being completed for the water wastewater systems. So any of the updates that result from those master planning exercises are then going to be brought forward into our infrastructure guidelines, so that anyone designing in the 2025 era can hopefully design for what we currently require. Does that help to answer those questions?
That is a great update, because I think most of us, when it comes down to that accountability and trying to keep things, on track, when, especially looking at the expected growth we're going to have, I think it's definitely well thought up, and thank you.
Councillor Warren.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that. Can you just expand on tree management?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. The tree management, as I understand it, what we are looking to try to accommodate and incorporate into the new developments coming forward is to ensure that if there are tree species that should remain, so there could be some tree preservation, as I understand it. Further to Director Barry's comments earlier, all of this hasn't been finalized as yet. So what we're looking to incorporate into the template agreement is an understanding that there could be a tree preservation component, there can be a tree compensation component, and then there is a tree scaping component, a streetscaping. So where we're looking for those street trees, what is arising as a result of these much larger applications coming forward and much larger developments, no longer 27 lots, but closer to 270, is that some of the challenges with respect to our landscape or geography are occurring. And what we need is a corporate review with a corporate lens to, if larger homes on smaller lots with narrower setbacks are proposed, but we still want lots of infrastructure into those lots vis-a-vis through telecommunications and other utilities, we're going to run out of room for a street tree, so to speak. So in consultation with our partners in Parks and Recreation Division, we're wanting to have a more global discussion on those aspects to ensure that we can still maintain a ratio of at least 1-to-1 for every lot, a street tree being planted. We're running out of room, as I say, when we try to incorporate everybody else's wish list. So we want to look at potentially some smaller species of trees that don't necessarily grow as big. We also want to revisit all of our setbacks to utility boxes, pedestals, etc. And we also want to make as much use of the public lands as possible. So whether some of those trees may be presented through park areas or parquet areas, again, as the municipality grows, some of our provisions and some of our guidelines are going to need to change to accommodate that larger landscape. But we certainly also recognize that tree planting in and of itself provides us with those green infrastructure, low impact developments that we're looking for as well, to provide the water balance and the stormwater management, correct? So that's where we're trying to balance everybody's needs with what we actually have to accommodate. So very recently, we've received 3 very large draft plans of subdivision to review, and this is where my team is starting immediately to look at is, it may be that some developments won't be allowed to have the same, we may need larger frontages, for instance, on bends of the road, so that we can still accommodate all the driveways required, but that we can provide for more street trees. So certainly going into 2025, our goal is to try to find as many opportunities for that. So whether that's a portion of that tree management or not, because really when we get into the subdivision agreement, we're at the detailed design implementation. we're trying to pull back from that at the guideline review stage, so I've jumped the gun bringing that forward, but we are trying to look at the guideline stage to say, when you're looking at your draft plan, what are some of the challenges we're going to face? Because a draft plan of subdivision is presented, that establishes where is everything going to be located. And while we may not get into, and these are where the specific trees are going to be located at the draft plan stage, if you set the draft plan up that I can't fit a tree, then we're not having a tree conversation come the detailed design stage. Do you see where I'm saying? So we have to kind of back that train up a little bit and recognize that things are changing, but then still try to ensure that we are greening up the canopy, which is certainly an expectation of the municipality. I understand there's some updates happening with respect to the Healthy Environment Plan as well. And so we're having some of those conversations in an effort to make sure that we accommodate all of the needs of the municipality at the same time. Not an easy task.
Just further, for shade, right? That's on a street is going to be very important going forward. But thank you for that. Are there any enhancements to low impact development, or is that kind of meshed in with the tree management?
So thank you for that question. Further on the green infrastructure, low impact development, and stormwater management guidelines, those will be the items that we'll bring forward in the new year in an effort to ensure that not only does our development community understand what the expectation of this municipality is, but also that all of us understand it as well. I'm finding that our guidelines are not just an item that we utilize for ensuring that people coming forward that want to develop in our community utilize. It's also my training tool for my new staff. So when you've been surrounded by words for a certain length of time, it becomes second nature to you. And we just want to make sure, and that's why we've done an extensive project to go through all of our guidelines. And with accessibility, you need to make sure that others can have the ability to read them, and we understand and respect that. I think it's also important that they're accessible to all of us to learn from and to follow. So we are working to pare some of that language down, but we also need to incorporate as much of the green infrastructure, low impact development as possible in order to comply with our Ministry of Conservation and Environment, Conservation and Parks Consolidated Linear Infrastructure Environmental Compliance Approval, which is a long way of saying is the ministry has already dictated to us that we shall have some water balance on our sites, right? That we will provide for quality control, et cetera. So we are really in an era where there has been a lot of change, both fundamentally within our municipality, but also external to us through the provincial government and the federal governments. And so we have to now incorporate all of this to make sense in a document that not only the development community will read, follow, and hopefully submit to us, right, in their designs, but also that we will review and be able to have conversations with our partners within the municipality to ensure that that development actually meets all those requirements. In a nutshell. Well, yes, sorry. The words, I didn't make up the titles of these words. Thank you, through to you, Mr. Chair, sorry.
Member O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to either Christine or Leah. You mentioned development charges in your preamble. Is there any update on, are they having meetings, or is there a committee formed, or is it just on hold? It's on hold?
In fact, I'm getting a signal here from the mayor, but I may not be in the best position to comment on the latest update. I wouldn't suggest that things are on hold. There were tribunal proceedings ongoing, and settlement negotiations that are continuing. So I think we are sort of all collectively moving towards resolution. As far as I'm aware, we're just not there yet, but now I'm getting signals from both sides of the room, so I'll stop talking now before I talk myself into a hole.
Thank you. I was asked yesterday to make sure that we had a counselor available to replace Eric Smeaton on the task force because they were planning a meeting. So that'll be coming forward to council on the 10th of December.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. In addition, those master planning documents that I indicated earlier that are coming forward, some items as early as December 10th, but then into the new year as well, are also going to identify those projects that are required to be completed to help with the development charge background study, which then informs the development charges themselves. So that's my understanding as well, is that 2025 will bring some changes in that direction as well.
Any further questions? What is your recommendation to council? Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, and through you, that the report ENG 2024-030 2025 subdivision agreement template update be received, that the city subdivision agreement and cost estimate schedule templates be updated and amended as outlined in Appendix A and B, respectively, to report ENG 2024-03, and that the city staff be directed to continue to monitor annually for any improvements to the language in the template of the subdivision agreement to ensure there are opportunities to refine the timelines and clarify language and development processes.
Seconder. Member Willick. Any discussion? All in favor? That carries. Thank you. That brings us to 6.6, ENG 2024-031, an update to development application approvals process, fee for subdivisions. Christina.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As per our update 2 years ago, it is our chance to come back before you. It was a recommendation back in 2022 that we would return on an every other year basis to ensure that our development application approval processing fees were right-sized to the nature of development coming forward and to the actual expectation of the project management of implementation of the subdivisions. These are fees that we receive only once we have an actual detailed design submission, and it involves the engineering review of that detailed design submission. The update back in 2022 was to the number of 4.5%, and we are now recommending that we go to the full 6%, which was discussed in 2022, but at that time we were still at the stage where we were looking to have development encouraged. The DAP fee that is being recommended to change today is only for the subdivisions. At this time, we have reviewed over the last couple of years the actual input and project management expectations of the development engineering team when it comes to site plans and condominium development. Both site plans and condominium development do not in and of themselves typically generate the creation of municipal infrastructure. Therefore, we're still maintaining that fee to be at the 3.5% as a form of encouragement, but also to be a balance of the efforts that are required from the development engineering team. The 6% is in concert with some of our neighbors and represents closer to the 50% mark of the developers paying for the engineering review at the detailed design stage or implementation of subdivisions. And I'm open for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Mayor Elmsley.
Thank you. Thank you. One of my questions was around how do we compare with our neighbors in terms of the 6%.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. So for instance, the city of Peterborough is at 6%. Other municipalities, and I did go into that a little bit in the report, and I talked about it when we talked about this subject in 2022. Some municipalities are still doing a staged fee compensation model, whereby you may have an initial application fee, then you submit, one submission with another fee, but then you go beyond 3 submissions, it takes a 4th detailed design submission, so then there's an extra fee, or they will predicate the fee on the number of units. All of that, in our opinion, provides for a lot more administrative effort in trying to reach those, first of all, making sure that we itemize those fees, then we make sure we collect those fees, then we make sure those fees are all fair and comparable to what we're reviewing. This fee is predicated specifically on the actual engineering cost. And from our perspective, 6% of the overall engineering cost provides for, if you have a more complex proposal or a lot more infrastructure proposed, then it only stands to reason we would have more effort put into it. But at least with it being a percentage of the works, we consider that to be somewhat more fair than providing for multiple stages in the process. So in answer to your question, yes, we do appear to be in line with our neighbors. We're not going above and beyond. There are places that are doing 7, 8, 9. And again, it's hard to totally sum up all of their fees when I get into very complex places in the system where they want to add additional fees. Do you know what I'm saying? It may be 9.2 because you had to pay $10,000 when you submitted your draft plan. We, again, are only providing this fee structure once you have an idea of your project, how large a project is, and you have an engineering cost estimate. It may not be their final cost estimate by any stretch, but that's what we're basing this on. So similar to doing a pro forma of land, this, 12 acres gives you a yield of 200 homes, that type of discussion. So we're hoping that it aligns well with that engineering type of discernment with a particular property.
Thank you for that, and just a little further. So I think I heard you say it's really based on cost recovery. And is this also been accounted for in the 2025 budget? Would you know that?
I believe through you, Mr. Chair. I believe because of when we were coming forward with this report, that it may not be currently in the 2025 budget, but that would be something I would have to confirm with Director Rojas and Director Bukaboom.
Councillor Warren?
Through you, just on that, do other municipalities use the same template that we're looking at? In that it's 6% period of the total cost without the this, that, and the other, but are there other municipalities that use that same template?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, one of the base moments when we decided to go down the road of a development approval processing fee is we had hired Watson and Associates to do a review of the province and to look at what other municipalities were proposing back in the day. I can't remember exactly what year that was. I believe we put the first development application approval processing fee bylaw in 2007, I believe. And so the review happened through the 2006 era, and yes, it is a fairly standard process. Not everybody calls it necessarily a DAP fee, so to speak, but it is fairly consistent to use a sliding scale of percentage for engineering works when you talk about reviewing engineering. It's also the way we calculate contingency, it's the way we calculate a lot of those items. And so this DAP fee would then be incorporated into our cost estimate schedule, which would form part of the subdivision agreement template that we talked about in the previous report.
Any further questions of Manager Sisson? Member O'Reilly?
Thank you. Not to belabor it, I realize we're talking about engineering fees as well, specifically here, but there was an article this week where I see the city of Vaughan is going to cut their development charges in half because of slow growth. They're hoping to attract more development. So, I mean, that doesn't speak specifically to whatever, but it's all part and parcel of it. But I think their development charges are $94,000, so they're hoping to cut them to around $50,000. So trying to get some more incentives to, that's been around for a long while, time other municipalities, but thank you.
Any further questions, Mayor Elmsley?
Motion, if you want it. As printed, the report ENG 2024-031, update to development application approvals process, DAAP, fee for subdivisions be received, that the city's development application approvals process, DAAP fee be increased to 6% for subdivisions, that the city's cost estimate schedule templates for subdivisions be updated and amended for 2025 as outlined in Appendix A to report ENG 2024-031 and that the city continue to review the DAAP fee every 2 years to ensure the fee is fair and in line with the costs of engineering review and project management by the city.
Seconder, Councillor Richardson. Any further discussion? All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Item 6.7, ENG 2024-032, Assumption of Arizona Heights Subdivision, Phase 1, Bob Cajun. Manager Sisson.
Sorry. We're excited today to bring the Assumption of Arizona Heights Phase 1. This has been a long-standing subdivision in Bob Cajun. They did some pre-servicing in the early 2000s. The project was left dormant for a while. Part of the reason that we have implemented a recommendation with respect to the length of time that it takes to actually construct all of the public services. We are pleased that at this time they have completed all of the infrastructure works. There were some deficiencies. We've had those resolved. We do have one block that will not be assumed at this time as part of the Phase 1, as it is specifically tied to Phase 2 and is being designed through that Phase 2 of the subdivision. We have done inspections. We are satisfied with everything that has been completed there, and we are recommending at this time to have assumption of the Sedona Court, the requisite water and sanitary infrastructure within Sedona Court, the sidewalk, as well as the stormwater management, which in this situation, it was a fairly early green infrastructure initiative taken, but it is an actual infiltration type basin. So there's no specific outlet from this particular facility. It's actually over time, the water that is gathered in this particular stormwater management pond, it would look on the surface like a stormwater management pond, but over time it actually infiltrates through the groundwater, into the groundwater. So to date, it has been very successful. It was tested at the very beginning as well. And because of the nature of the fractured bedrock in this area of Bob Cajun, it has been successful. It has been treated, and it is at this time ready to be assumed.
Questions? Councillor Warren.
I'll just move the recommendation. Assumption of Arizona Heights subdivision, Phase 1, unless anybody
I was
else
going to
has a
say,
question.
anybody else have any questions?
Don't want to
Okay.
jump too quickly. Okay, we're good? Okay. That report, ENG 2024-032, Assumption of Arizona Heights Subdivision, Phase 1, Bob Cajun be received, that the assumption of Arizona Heights Subdivision, Phase 1, Geographic Village of Bob Cajun, City of Kawartha Lakes be approved, that an assumption bylaw substantially in the form attached as Appendix A to report engineering 2024-032 be approved and adopted by council, and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to execute any documents and agreements required by the approval of this application.
Seconder, Member O'Reilly. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carries. Thank you. That brings us to item 6.8, ENG 2024-033, 2025 update to pre-servicing of subdivision lands, policy number CP 2018-009. Manager Sisson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. This was an additional update to our template collection. Similar to the subdivision agreement template, it was necessary to provide better accessible and inclusive language within the agreement, better communication and clarity. We needed some reference to detailed design, as it had been misinterpreted by some that there was an expectation or an opportunity to start with pre-servicing on a subdivision prior to actually having a detailed design submission and or at a satisfactory point in time where we were satisfied with a detailed design. We also have had to do some correction for ministry names. That happens over time. And make sure that we are incorporating anything that's required from the municipality based on our most recent experiences with pre-servicing over the last year. And I'm available for any questions. So we've updated the policy and the actual template agreement. Both are available on the website, and so both will be updated to the website for 2025 as well.
Any questions for Christina? Member Barkwell?
Thank you. Through you. Section 2.05 about the cash or certified check for securities. Can you explain what the change is? I know it's kind of I don't quite remember exactly what our policy was on returning the deposits, but was at a meeting the other night where somebody was complaining about it took them over a year to get their deposit back, and I wonder if this will affect them.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So we don't take a deposit. We have securities that are received, and the reason for this being clarified, both the cash and letter of credit component, is that in previous years there was an availability or an expectation that we would accept bonds, and surety bonds are not really something that the municipality is contemplating at this time. So we wanted to be as clear as possible. We were getting multiple questions and multiple considerations of that. The security is only released, so typically through the pre-servicing, you are able to submit 50% security. That's the net benefit over a subdivision agreement, entering directly into a subdivision agreement when you have a substantially approved development, a detailed design, and going with the pre-servicing. The pre-servicing affords you the opportunity. You're working only on your own property, so we allow 50% security as opposed to the full 100% security. Then when you roll into the actual subdivision agreement, you are then taking that 50% security and you're adding the additional that's required for works that haven't been completed yet to top you up to that 100%. Once you have assumption of the subdivision and that bylaw is registered, so similar to Arizona Heights that we just spoke about, as soon as that bylaw is registered, then we will put a letter through to finance indicating that we're ready to release all of that security. But that's the subdivision process. I'm not sure if this particular question was directed to a subdivision, perhaps a site plan, or we do not take deposits or amounts of money based on individual lots. They're not taken from a private property owner. It is all done explicitly through the developer and their team.
You were at the same meeting that I was at, and I didn't understand why he had to put a deposit down and didn't get it back for a year.
His deposit was in the form of a letter of credit, I believe. And the reason he didn't get his deposit back was because he hadn't finished the landscaping, and the drainage was contingent on the landscaping being completed.
I thought...
He told me at the time, and I looked into it.
I thought you would know. Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Ashmore?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, to Assistant. Would this apply to, I know over the years, green energy projects whereby the proponent failed to fulfill the requirements, for example, berms and tree plantings and the like? Would this apply to that type of an agreement?
Thank you for the question, through you, Mr. Chair. This is specific to subdivision development only at this time. And so it's a pre-servicing. What is really happening with pre-servicing is we are encouraging people to start the development process, get the municipal infrastructure built so that we can hopefully be ready for those homes to be built, but that we're making sure everything is done under our requirements. And it is a way to more or less fast track for the developer to keep moving. I mentioned earlier with one of the questions, sometimes it's the composite utility plan or the streetscaping plan that is causing a delay in entering into the subdivision itself, into the subdivision agreement itself. And so the pre-servicing is a way to say, we've established where the road is going, we've established where the mainline infrastructure is going. Let's get moving and letting people start to get those pieces of infrastructure in the ground.
Any further questions? Councillor Ashmore?
I'll move it, yeah.
Okay. Motion to, as printed, Councillor Ashmore, seconder. Mayor Elmsley. Any further discussion? All in favor? That carries. Okay. That brings us to item 7. Motion to adjournment, Member Barkwell, second by Councillor Warren. All in favor? Carries. Thank you, everyone.